Hey everyone, before we get started, I've got some exciting news. My third video is now live on my new channel, Index Unknown. That's where I dive into the hidden side of history, the secrets, the theories, the conspiracies, the things they don't want you to know. This new video is all about the Dyatlov Pass incident, one of the strangest and most chilling mysteries of the 20th century, where 9 hikers met a fate that still defies explanation. The link's below if you're interested. Check it out after this video. Now, let's get into today's story. Imagine the haze of dawn being lifted over a battlefield. Out of the mist ride women on horseback, their spears and bows already drawn. They're fast, organized, and merciless. The Greeks called them the Amazons, warrior women who lived beyond the borders of the known world, where no man ruled and no king commanded. To the Greeks, they were a paradox, feared as enemies, admired as warriors, and desired as lovers. Time and again, they appear in the great tales, clashing with Heracles, defying Theseus, standing alongside the doomed warriors of Troy. They were not goddesses, yet they were no ordinary mortals either. Their very existence seemed to challenge the natural order of the world as the Greeks understood it. Were they a people of myth, born of divine blood and raised in a society where only women held power? Or were they echoes of real warrior tribes beyond Greece, woven into legend until they became larger than life? Whatever their origins, their memory endured, painted on vases, carved into marble, and etched into the imagination of those who heard their name. This is the story of the Amazons, the warrior women of Greek mythology. Every group of people has a beginning, and the Amazons were no exception. The Greeks said they came from lands far beyond the familiar coasts of the Aegean, places of windswept plains and endless rivers where the sun rose on foreign soil. Some claimed their homeland was in Scythia, north of the Black Sea, where fierce horse-riding tribes roamed. Others placed them in Asia Minor, near the city of Theseus on the river Thermodon, a land that became their stronghold in myth. Their bloodline was said to trace back to war itself. Many tales named Ares, the god of bloodlust and war, as their father, and a nymph or queen named Harmonia as their mother. From such a union came a people who lived and breathed conflict, a nation of women shaped by war, independence, and the refusal to bend the knee to any man. The first of their queens was often said to be Otrera, daughter of Ares, who not only led her sisters to greatness, but also raised a temple to Artemis at Ephesus. That temple, in time, would become one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, a fitting legacy for the woman who first gave the Amazons their divine favor and sacred rights. Unlike the city-states of Greece, where men ruled in council and kings commanded armies, Amazonian society was said to be different. They were a matriarchy, led by queens whose power was absolute. War was their lifeblood and freedom their creed. To the Greeks, this reversal of gender order seemed alien, even threatening, but it also made the Amazons unforgettable. So the tales of their beginning set them apart from the very start. They were born of a god, crowned by queens, and bound to a destiny that would place them time and again against the greatest champions of Greece. When the Greeks pictured the Amazons, they did not imagine them as ordinary women. They were warriors first and foremost, and every detail of their appearance set them apart. On painted vases and carved into marble reliefs, they were shown in the thick of battle, bow drawn, spear raised, shield pressed tight against their arm. Unlike Greek women, who were usually depicted in long flowing robes, the Amazons wore short tunics suited for riding and fighting. Many accounts give them the Phrygian cap, a soft, forward-curving hat that marked them as foreigners. Their armor was often light, designed for mobility, and they carried distinctive crescent-shaped shields, along with spears, double-edged axes, and above all, the bow, a weapon that made them feared across battlefields. Horses were their closest companions. To the Greeks, the image of a mounted Amazon charging with a spear was both thrilling and terrifying. These women were said to have mastered archery from horseback, raining down arrows while outmaneuvering heavy infantry. In art, they almost blur the line between rider and steed, as though the two were one being. Their appearance was not only physical but cultural. To Greek eyes, they embodied otherness, exotic clothing, strange weapons, foreign customs, all markers of a people who stood outside the order of Greece. And yet, there was also admiration. The Amazons were beautiful, often shown with youthful, athletic bodies and braided hair, their strength accentuating their allure. But that beauty was always edged with danger. An Amazon might draw your gaze, but just as easily she could draw her bow. And in myth, those who underestimated them rarely lived to regret it. The world of the Amazons was unlike anything the Greeks knew. Where their own cities were ruled by councils of men and kings sat at the head of armies, the Amazons lived under the command of queens. Power passed not through fathers, but from mother to daughter, and every queen was expected to lead her people both in war and in governance. Men, in their society, played little part. Some stories claim the Amazons kept them only for the sake of children, sending away male offspring or crippling them so they could not threaten the matriarchy. Others suggest they maintained uneasy alliances with neighboring tribes, visiting only when bloodlines needed renewing. However these tales were told, the message was always the same. This was a people ruled entirely by women, a mirror opposite of the Greek world. The names of their queens stand out as legends of their own. Hippolyta, remembered for her famed war belt taken by Heracles. Antiope, abducted by Theseus, and the spark of the great Amazon invasion of Athens. Penthesilea, whose courage carried her to the walls of Troy, where she met Achilles in her final stand. Myrina, the conqueror queen who led her armies across Libya and Anatolia, toppling kings and founding cities. And at the beginning of it all was Otrera, daughter of Ares, said to be the very first Amazon queen and founder of the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. These rulers gave their people more than leadership. They gave them identity. Each queen defined an era of Amazonian history, marking the Amazons not just as faceless foes in Greek stories, but as a lineage of women who stood against the greatest heroes of their age. To the Greeks, this inversion of order was deeply unsettling. And yet, in the memory of myth, it made the Amazons impossible to forget. The Amazons were not remembered simply for what they did, but for what they represented. To the Greeks, they were the embodiment of fierce independence, a people who defied the order of the world by rejecting submission to men. Their very existence was both alluring and threatening, a vision of women who were not wives or mothers in the traditional sense, but warriors who lived and died by the spear. In battle, they were relentless. Their skill in archery was legendary, and they were said to rival even the finest Greek champions in hand-to-hand combat. Unlike the heavy infantry that dominated Greek warfare, the Amazons fought with agility, striking quickly and vanishing before their enemies could answer. This made them dangerous opponents and gave rise to countless tales of heroes proving themselves by defeating an Amazon queen. But they were more than just fighters. They were leaders, strategists, and rulers of a society that turned Greek expectations upside down. Each queen was remembered as clever, commanding, and utterly unyielding in her authority. They acted as priestesses as well, giving worship to Ares, their divine father, and Artemis, the huntress who represented freedom and untamed nature. At the same time, Greek poets often gave the Amazons a dual edge. They were both beautiful and deadly, desirable and dangerous. This tension made them a constant fascination in art and story, not merely warriors, but symbols of a world where women could not be controlled. The Amazons, then, were not defined by one trait, but by a balance of contradictions, admired for their courage, feared for their strength, and remembered for their refusal to bow to the roles that Greek society demanded. One of the most famous Amazonian tales comes in the story of Heracles. As part of his 12 labors, he was ordered to bring back the war belt, or girdle, of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. This belt was no ordinary ornament. It was said to have been a gift from Ares himself, a symbol of her authority and of her unmatched skill as a warrior. To possess it was to claim victory over the Amazons themselves. When Heracles arrived at the Amazon city of Theseus, the story splits into two traditions. In one version, Hippolyta welcomed him. She admired his strength and agreed to give him the belt willingly, either out of respect or as a gesture of alliance. But in another telling, Hera, forever bent on Heracles' destruction, intervened. She spread rumors among the Amazons that Heracles had come not in peace, but to abduct their queen. The Amazons rallied to arms, and the scene turned violent. A great battle broke out, horsemen clashing, arrows raining from above. In the chaos, Heracles struck down Hippolyta and tore the belt from her body. Others say she survived, but her trust was shattered, and the encounter left blood spilled between the hero and the warrior women. Whichever version is told, the story reveals much about the Amazons' place in Greek myth. For Heracles, the labor was not just about strength. It was about proving himself against a queen whose authority rivaled his own. And for the Greeks who retold the story, it was a reminder that even the mightiest hero could not face the Amazons without conflict, deception, and divine intervention. The girdle of Hippolyta became just another trophy in Heracles' long list of victories, but the Amazons, once again, were more than an obstacle. They were a people who forced heroes to measure themselves against something foreign, formidable, and beyond the ordinary order of Greece. If Heracles' encounter with the Amazons was marked by deception, the story of Theseus was marked by abduction and war. The tale begins when Theseus, king of Athens, either joined Heracles on his campaign or undertook his own journey to Theseus. There, he encountered Antiope, sometimes said to be Hippolyta's sister, sometimes Hippolyta herself. Theseus carried her off to Athens, whether as a lover, a prize, or a wife. The details vary, but all agree that the act enraged the Amazons. To them, Antiope's capture was not just a theft. It was an insult, a violation of their queen and their sovereignty. In response, the Amazons raised their warriors and marched on Athens itself. This invasion became known as the Amazonomachy, the battle between the Amazons and the Athenians. In the heart of the city, amid its walls and temples, chaos erupted. Greek art later immortalized the scene. Amazons in short tunics and helmets, wielding bows and axes, fighting tooth and nail against hoplites and horsemen. The clash was remembered as one of the most desperate defenses in Athenian legend. In some versions, Antiope fought alongside her sisters against the Athenians, torn between love for Theseus and loyalty to her people. In others, she stood beside Theseus, betraying her kin for the sake of her new life. The tragedy of her divided loyalties often ended with her death, struck down in battle, by accident, by her sisters, or by Theseus himself. For Athens, the Amazonomachy became a symbol. It was retold as a moment when the city defended itself not only against a foreign enemy, but against the chaos of a world turned upside down. To the Greeks, the Amazons represented disorder. Their defeat by Athens was framed as the restoration of balance, a victory of civilization over what they considered barbarism. But the story carries a double edge, for if the Athenians remembered their triumph, they also immortalized their enemy. The Amazons became etched in sculpture, painted on pottery, and carved into temple friezes, forever locked in combat and never forgotten. The Amazons appear one final, unforgettable time in the grand sweep of the Trojan War. After the death of Hector, when Troy's defenses were crumbling and despair hung heavy over the city, the Trojan king Priam called upon allies from far and wide. Among those who answered was Penthesilea, queen of the Amazons, who led her sisters into battle as the last great hope for Troy. Penthesilea was no ordinary queen. She was said to be the daughter of Ares, a warrior unmatched in skill and yet burdened by tragedy. Some myths say she had accidentally killed her sister in a hunting accident and came to Troy seeking an honorable death in battle to ease her grief. Her arrival electrified the Trojans. For a moment, it seemed as though the tide of war might turn. The Amazons charged into the fray, cutting through the Greeks with spear and arrow, driving them back from the walls of Troy. Penthesilea herself fought with a fury that few could withstand until at last she faced the greatest of all Greek warriors, Achilles. The two clashed before the walls, their duel a storm of steel and blood. In the end, Penthesilea fell. Achilles struck her down, and as her helmet was torn away, he gazed upon her face and was overcome. Legends say that in the moment of her death, he felt a surge of desire, even love, for the woman he had just slain. Some poets tell of Achilles cradling her body, struck silent by beauty that came too late. Others tell of jeers from his comrade Thersites, mocking him for pitying the enemy, only for Achilles to kill Thersites in rage. Penthesilea's story is one of the most tragic in Greek myth. She was a warrior queen who came to Troy not for glory, but for redemption, and met her fate at the hands of the greatest warrior of his age. For the Greeks, her death emphasized the futility of the war and the cost of defiance. But in remembering her courage, they also immortalized the Amazons once more. Women who fought to the very end, fearless even in the shadow of Achilles. Not all Amazon queens were remembered only for their duels with Greek heroes. Some, like Myrina, carved out legacies of conquest so vast they rivaled those of kings. Her story is older, almost drifting into the shadowy edges of myth, but it shows a different face of the Amazons, not just defenders of their homeland, but empire builders who sought to expand their dominion far beyond Theseus. Myrina was said to have ruled an army that stretched across Libya, Anatolia, and even into parts of Syria. With her warriors, she defeated tribes, overthrew rival kings, and left her mark in the form of cities and temples. Some accounts claim she led her Amazons against the Atlanteans, subduing them in battle. In other tales, she warred against armies sent by the gods themselves, holding her ground with the ferocity of Ares's true daughter. Unlike the tragedies of Hippolyta or Penthesilea, Myrina's story carries the weight of triumph. She is remembered not for being taken captive or for falling in battle, but for shaping lands and leaving monuments behind. To the Greeks, this was an unsettling possibility, that women could not only fight, but also conquer, rule, and build legacies usually reserved for men. Yet Myrina's story also fades into obscurity. While later poets and artists immortalized the duels of Heracles and Achilles, the tales of her empire were whispered at the edges of Greek memory, half remembered and half believed. Perhaps this was because she stood apart, a queen who did not fall to a Greek hero, but instead built her own legend, independent of their triumphs. Through Myrina, the Amazons were remembered not only as foils to heroes, but as rulers in their own right. A people whose destiny was not always to be conquered, but sometimes to conquer. Though the Amazons are most often remembered for their encounters with Heracles, Theseus, Penthesilea, and Myrina, they appear in scattered fragments of other myths as well. Each of these encounters added to their reputation as a people who could stand toe-to-toe with the greatest champions of the ancient world. One such tale comes from the story of Bellerophon, the hero who slew the Chimera. After his triumph, he was sent on further quests, and among them was a war against the Amazons. Mounted on Pegasus, his winged steed, Bellerophon rained down death from above, striking at the warrior women with arrows and spears. Even so, the fight was remembered as fierce and hard-won, a battle that only confirmed the Amazons' place among the most dangerous foes a Greek could face. The Amazons also crossed paths with Priam of Troy long before the Trojan War. In his youth, Priam had joined a coalition of Phrygians to push back the Amazon warriors who were threatening their lands. The young prince fought bravely against them, and though the Phrygians claimed victory, the very fact that the Amazons were remembered in connection with Troy foreshadowed their later role in its greatest war. There are also whispers of Amazons serving as mercenaries, lending their strength to kings and warlords who could afford their loyalty. Other stories describe them venturing into the founding legends of distant Greek colonies, dueling champions on the edges of the known world. Wherever their name appears, the theme is the same. The Amazons arrive as outsiders, test the courage of men, and leave behind the memory of battle. Though these clashes are often brief in the records, they reveal something deeper about how the Greeks saw them. The Amazons were never background figures. They were the ultimate measure of a hero's worth, the challenge he had to face before claiming greatness. And even when they were defeated, the Greeks chose to immortalize them, for an enemy so formidable only elevated the glory of those who survived. For all their fame, the Amazons were wrapped in layers of myth, exaggeration, and misunderstanding. To the Greeks, they were both real enough to be feared and distant enough to be made strange. Over time, this mixture of awe and anxiety gave rise to some of the most enduring misconceptions about them. The most notorious was the belief that Amazons removed one of their breasts to better draw a bow. The very word Amazon was sometimes explained as Amazos, meaning without a breast. Yet in art, the Amazons were never shown this way. Vase paintings and sculptures always depicted them with balanced, athletic forms. The idea likely came later, a symbolic tale invented to mark their dedication to war, women who would sacrifice even their own bodies for the sake of battle. Another misconception was their supposed isolation from men. Some versions claimed that Amazons shunned all contact with the opposite sex, killing or crippling any male children. Others suggested they met with neighboring tribes only when the need for children arose. These stories say more about Greek anxieties than about Amazon society. To the Greeks, a world where men were unnecessary was unthinkable, and yet in the Amazons, they imagined just that. At the heart of these stories lies the symbolism of the Amazons themselves. They were the other, the mirror image of Greek ideals. Where Greek women were expected to remain in the home, the Amazons rode into war. Where men held power in the city, Amazons crowned queens to rule alone. They stood for chaos, inversion, and danger, but also for freedom, courage, and possibility. And perhaps there was truth behind the legend. Archaeological discoveries in the steppes north of the Black Sea have revealed graves of Scythian women buried with weapons, their bones marked by battle wounds. These were real warrior women who fought alongside men, and it is very likely that Greek travelers carried tales of them back to their homeland, where fact blurred into myth until the Amazons were born. In the end, the misconceptions matter less than the meaning. The Amazons were never meant to be simple history. They were symbols, warnings of disorder, yes, but also reminders that strength, leadership, and courage were not bound to one gender alone. Though the stories of the Amazons belong to myth, their shadow lingers across history, art, and culture. The Greeks themselves never let their memory fade. Temples, friezes, and pottery carried scenes of the Amazonomachy, as if the clash was as defining as the war against the centaurs or the Titans. On the Parthenon in Athens, carved into stone meant to last for ages, warriors locked in combat with Amazons stood as a reminder of the city's resilience and its imagined triumph over chaos. The Romans, too, inherited the fascination. They told of Amazon queens among the distant peoples they encountered, weaving echoes of the legend into their own histories. Later cultures in Europe reimagined them again and again, shaping them into symbols of both danger and allure. In the medieval world, they appeared as distant tribes at the edges of the earth, a reminder that there were always lands beyond civilization where strange peoples might dwell. In modern times, the Amazons have become more than figures of myth. They have become icons. Renaissance painters and sculptors revived their images with admiration, and in the 20th century, their name became a rallying point for stories of powerful women in literature, film, and popular culture. Nowhere is this clearer than in the figure of Wonder Woman, whose very origins draw on the Amazonian legend, a direct line from the myths of Theseus to the pages of modern comics. Their legacy is layered. To the Greeks, they symbolized the inversion of order. To later generations, they became symbols of freedom, resilience, and the idea that power and valor are not bound by gender. Each retelling reshaped them, but the core remained the same. The Amazons were unforgettable. Even now, thousands of years after the Greeks first told their stories, the name Amazon still carries weight. It conjures up images of strength, independence, and a world where women rode into battle as equals or superiors to men. That is the true legacy of the Amazons. They refused to vanish and instead became eternal.